And welcome to the first day at the races in 2 years. The League of Women Voters is delighted to have contested races and to welcome you this afternoon to this year's Day at the Races. Nancy Karapetsa, our moderator, is a league member from Wayland, Massachusetts, and the former president of the Massachusetts State League of Women Voters. She's experienced and willing on a Sunday to come out and help many towns with their debates. She'll go over the format, as I mentioned.
Each candidate has agreed to the following format. They will have up to 2 minutes to give an introductory statement. After that, we will have written questions from the audience that will be screened for duplication or just to try to consolidate the questions as much as we can. The candidates will then have up to 1 minute to respond to that question. If there is a question directed to a specific candidate, the other candidates will have up to 1 minute then also to give another re-response. Or if there is any little mini debate, everyone would have one chance to re-respond. For the closing statement, everyone will have up to 1 minute for their closing statement. The candidates have agreed to begin, we'll do it in alphabetical order, beginning at the top of the alphabet for the opening statement and then reverse the order for the closing statement. We have a timer here sitting in the, timers sitting here in the front rows that will give a 30-second yellow warning sign to the candidates. March 28th, the voters of Winchester will elect 2 of the 4 candidates who are before you. They have agreed to the same format. We will begin with an opening statement in alphabetical order, up to 2 minutes, with Roger Berman.
Thank you. Thank you for everybody being here today and giving up a Sunday afternoon. The last few years have been rough on Winchester. Too many expenses have been chasing too few revenue dollars. It's one thing to criticize our budgets and our financial processes. It's something very different to know how to solve these challenges. I'm the only candidate who's been on the Finance Committee charged with examining every line of the budget. This is critical to being able to fundamentally understand what our financial problems are and to understand how they can be addressed. For the last 6 years on the Finance Committee, I've argued for more openness, for timely and accurate financial reporting, for greater efficiency and productivity in every department, from the DPW to public safety to the school system, and for multi-year budgeting. One experience you gain from serving on town committees is to realize the important needs that exist throughout the town. I have learned to listen. I've learned to listen to the voices in the room and to those who quietly depend on town services. I've taken my campaign theme, the words, one town. I'm not running as a candidate for a particular precinct or a budget line item. I seek this challenge in order to bring my business and town experiences to the selectmen's table. I pledge to restore a tone of respect to our deliberations. I pledge to work to restore credibility to our financial reporting and pronouncements. And I pledge to work diligently to represent one town comprised of varied interests and varied voices. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, voters of Winchester. My thanks to the League. My name is Ellen Burkhart, and I'm a candidate for the Board of Selectmen. My goal in this race is to open up the process. I think with a $72 million budget, it's very important that the voters have confidence in the decisions that the town boards make, that they have confidence in the process by which those decisions are arrived at, and that they understand the judgments and the policy choices behind the decisions the town makes. My background is in law and finance. I grew up in Winchester. I went to Harvard. I worked on Capitol Hill for the Senate Intelligence Committee, specifically for 2 senators who are no longer with us, but who I consider great mentors, Daniel Patrick Moynihan and Henry Scoop Jackson. I went to Georgetown for law school, and I came back to Winchester in the mid-'80s. I bought my house on Crescent Road in 1988. I've been a town meeting member since 1989, and I have watched the process with greater concern over how it evolves and the information that's available to the public. This is a really important election, and I would urge all of you listening or watching or talking about it to vote on the 28th, because there are significant decisions to be made about how the town goes forward and how the town brings itself together to face the fiscal challenges we have ahead. I thank you for your time.
Thank you. My name is Peter Haley, and before I answer the question of why I'm a candidate for the Board of Selectmen, I need to ask each of you a question. My question is this: where do you live? Common enough question, a question we hear when we meet any group of strangers. But the question for us here today and in this election is, when we answer the question, I live in Winchester, Massachusetts, what is it that we are saying about ourselves? Simply that we live in a community with pleasant physical surroundings, a community by which any measure of demographic statistics is an affluent community? Is that it for us? I think there's something more about being a member of the Winchester community and about participating in the community. I've had some time to observe that. I grew up in Winchester. My family moved here in 1962. I graduated from the high school in 1976. I went on to my undergraduate education, came back to law school, and in 1992, my wife and I returned to Winchester to educate our children here and to inculcate in our children those same values that my parents and the community instilled in me when I grew up here. The problems that beset us as a community financially are not difficult to determine. Our healthcare budget has gone up from $3 million to $6 million in the last 5 years. Our energy budget's gone from $1 million to $3 million in the same period of time. The school population in the last 8 years has grown by 767 students. It's not difficult to determine what the issues are before us. The question is how we will address those and what it means to us to be members of this community. I think the way in which we need to use our remaining financial resources and the financial resources we have is a way in which reflects the values of our community. And I care where I live. I care how the town I live in is governed, and I ask you to join me by voting for me on March 28th as people who do care where they live, how they are governed, and are prepared to do something about it. Thank you.
Charles Nuremberger?
Thank you. Is this working? Yeah, that's right. I'd first like to thank the League of Women Voters for sponsoring the day at the races. I'd like to thank all of you for being here today, taking the time out of your busy schedule. I am Chuck Nuremberger, and I'm a candidate for re-election to the Board of Selectmen. I'm a lifelong resident of Winchester. I reside on Cross Street with my wife, Mary Ann. My service began in 1988 as a town meeting member. Since then, I've served on the Finance Committee, the Capital Planning Committee, the Planning Board, and for the past 6 years, a member of the Board of Selectmen. I have experience and extensive knowledge of the workings of all departments of municipal government, and have developed excellent and productive relationships with my colleagues and counterparts, and with town employees, and with many constituents throughout Winchester. I measure the effectiveness of public officials not by years served or positions held, but by the positive contributions they make to the community. During my career in public service, I've been honored to work with talented and dedicated community members to spearhead such major initiatives as the flooding and drainage program, the implementation of the advanced life support, the creation of the Capital Building Stabilization Fund, negotiated municipal bargaining groups to decrease the town's health insurance, the Teen Center. I supported the restoration of Leonard's, McDonald's, and Mullen Field, the Bellino Park, the Shefflow Park, the preservation of the Sanborn House, the Teen Center I've mentioned, and a request for $1 million for revitalization of North Main Street. These are just some of the accomplishments during my service to Winchester. I hope through this event, the citizens of Winchester will have a better understanding of who the candidates are, what they stand for, and how each candidate will make a positive contribution to Winchester to make Winchester a better place for all of us to call home. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we'll now begin with the questions, and continuing in the same alphabetical order. The first question will go to Ms. Burkhart. What would you do to create and maintain affordable housing in Winchester?
I think the best thing you can do to solve the affordable, I forgot about the mic, my apologies. I think the best thing that you can do to solve the affordable housing problem is to get people to contribute funds to the problem. You have a town that real estate values have risen in substantially. You have town employees who cannot mostly afford to live here. You could do a couple of things. You could take some of the town housing that is apartment-style housing and earmark some of it to be town employee housing for town employees and have a lottery to allow some of those employees to live there in slightly more affordable circumstances than the real estate market would permit. But I actually take perhaps a contrary view on the affordable housing side. I think a town like Winchester does itself a disservice when it takes real estate that's worth upwards of $1 million an acre and turns it into housing that is worth considerably less than that. I think you take the money and you contribute it to the cause rather than taking the underlying asset that's worth perhaps 4 or 5 times the solution that you're coming up with. That's what I would suggest.
Sure. I think the first thing that we could do to promote more affordable housing in town is to, for everything that we're doing in town, have a town planner for the town of Winchester and plan what we are doing. Right now, we're seeing substantial parcels of real estate in Winchester being developed. The Immaculate Conception site, the Pansy Patch on Cambridge Street, and these things are being developed in an ad hoc manner. We address the problems as they arise. We respond to whoever acquires the property, and we respond to whatever proposals they put up. We're very reactive when it comes to finding out what we're going to do with the property in our town. I think if we took a longer range view and were proactive in terms of identifying sites, not only for affordable housing, but for other community uses as well, we'd be a lot more successful at affordable housing and a lot more successful at controlling and determining what our community looks like in the years to come. But to do that, I think we need to commit to funding a town planner, and we need to commit to planning in a long-range manner what happens with the land and the resources in our town.
Mr. Nurnberger, the same question.
Thank you. Well, I'm happy to report that the Board of Selectmen really has been somewhat successful in the past 6 years. We've really pushed the initiative of the first-time home buyers. It's a Selectmen's program. And in the last 3 years, we've created 6 affordable housing opportunities through this program. And it's actually a home ownership program. In fact, one of our DPW workers managed to get in the lottery and won one of the units. So it's not exactly everything we want to do for affordable housing, but at every opportunity we get, whether we're negotiating with landowners, we try to push affordable housing. Also, Winning Farm, although it's 88 units, all units will count towards the affordable housing Chapter 40B requirement, so there'll be 88 units there. 20% will actually be affordable, but because of that, all of them will count towards our affordable housing responsibilities. Thank you.
Mr. Berman?
Thank you. I, too, support a planner and a master planning process. It's been over 50 years since we've had a master plan. And what's happening is our town is being redeveloped around us. And quite often the town are the last people to have any input into that. The Pansy Patch, Lock Farm, these are parcels that are zoned in a way now that if we're to change it, it becomes spot zoning. We needed an active voice at the table. The planning board is doing a very effective job recently on some of the big projects, the hospital project in particular, of asking. In other towns, planning board and the town ask for the developer or the interests that are coming into the town to pay for our professional staff to help evaluate that's coming to us. We've been undermanned, outgunned quite often when proposals come forward. And by learning how to ask and to ask on a continual basis, we can push for more affordable housing. We can push for over 55 housing. We can talk about housing that doesn't increase multiple bedroom dwellings that bring more kids to our schools. Thank you.
And the next question, we will begin with Mr. Haley. Would you support the budgeting for and the appointment of a town planner?
Yes, I would. I would support the budgeting for and the appointment of town planner, as we've discussed. I think it's important that we do that. And I think it's important that where we have the ability to take control of issues as a local government, we do take control of them. We are, by our own circumstances, forced to be reactive to many things that arise We have a growing student population, which we really can't control unless we're prepared to devalue or diminish the quality of the public school system. And we have other needs in the town in terms of energy and health care, which are growing beyond our ability to control. But where we can control things by planning, such as land use, I think it's important that we do that, and it's important that we look for opportunities to be proactive. Town planner is a great opportunity there and a good example of that.
Mr. Nurnberg, same question.
Thank you. Unfortunately, I do not support the planner at this particular time. Putting together the 07 budget and using the reserves that we're using, looking at the compelling need that Dr. Marini and the school committee made for additional teachers. They have the equivalent of a new elementary school. 450 new students are in the system right now, and right now, quite frankly, the idea of hiring a planner is a good idea. I just don't think that if you're going to hire a planner that it makes sense to be laying off DPW staff or not funding education to the level that they really need. So I just can't support it right now. I was on the planning board for 3 years. I think the planning board has a lot more resources than they've ever had in the past. It's not the end-all, be-all, but when you take a look at the compelling needs of the school system, and there'll be more kids at the front door next September, I just, at this point, can't support it.
Mr. Berman, same question.
Well, following on to my last response, I am supportive of a planner. One of the things that we've talked about at the Finance Committee over the last 6 years I've been on it, too, as chairman, has been the notion of leverage. There are things that we should be spending money on that we can identify a return for the town. This is one of those areas. We have McCall School, which is maxed out now. To the extent that we could have had better planning, better insight, we maybe would have built a bigger school. We've just opened Ambrose. It's maxed out. What are we going to do on future schools? As I mentioned before, our housing choices that we make have an impact on our schools. If we continue to encourage and build on the open land more homes that bring more kids, we're just further impacting the problem we already have with our enrollment. We can do better by looking ahead. We've argued for multi-year budgeting. We should be doing multi-year planning. We are the only town in this area that does not have a planner. It's time that we stepped up and did that.
Ms. Burkhardt, the same question.
Thank you. I take perhaps a bit of a different perspective because I think the buck stops with the Board of Selectmen. And I think the decisions that have caused the town great financial difficulty, Winning Farm comes to mind, were made by the Board of Selectmen. The planner is a useful concept. It's always good to have good professional advice. But the decision to sell 12.5 acres of land for $1.5 million was a decision made repeatedly by the Board of Selectmen. I disagree with that decision. I also think the decisions made by the town's legal counsel, have contributed to the town's budgetary and management problems. So while I think it's always helpful to have good professional advice and looking ahead can always be useful, I think the Board of Selectmen is the board whose duty it is to deal with some of these larger budget issues, and the board needs to step up to that responsibility and not simply waive the concept of another person who would cost us $80,000 or $90,000 plus benefits and say that's the magic bullet. There's room for a lot of perspectives here, but the board needs to step up.
And the next question will begin with Mr. Nurnberger. Specific is the word in this question that's underlined several times. Could you please describe any specific changes you would make to this year's proposed budget?
Well, I actually made, on February 9th, I actually made a proposal to the Board of Selectmen. As a member of the Board of Selectmen, according to the town charter, I have an obligation and a right to give some policy direction to the town manager. And on February 9th, I presented a series of ideas and concepts, a proposal that actually did a couple of things. It reduced the amount of cash reserves. I'm very concerned about our cash reserves. Using cash reserves can affect the AAA bond rating and the interest rate in which we borrow money. My plan also identified aggressive energy conservation, aggressive recycling at the transfer station, provided a fair wage adjustment for all employees, and also, and probably most importantly, provide additional funds for the schools for increased enrollments. It also prepares us for the FY08 and FY09 budgets. So I've actually been proactive in this.
Mr. Berman, the same question.
Thank you. As a member of the Finance Committee and on the Subcommittee on Energy, we've already voted a cut in the energy budget. This is a town and a Board of Selectmen that's appointed a Energy Conservation Committee 2 years ago, which never met. It met last month for the first time. So while Winchester residents have been turning down the heat in their houses, driving slower, shutting off lights, you walk into Town Hall and quite often it feels like a sauna. We have schools where windows are open during the day. We've cut the energy budget by 10%, and we're encouraging the town to proactively do what its residents are doing. Transfer station. I was on the Solid Waste Study Committee. We've made proposals over the last 5 years. The last rate increase for haulers that we had at the transfer station, we got a commitment from the selectmen to revisit that rate within 3 to 6 months. We're not even able to get on the agenda to have that discussed by the Board of Selectmen. Again, another savings that could happen. I, too, am concerned about the extent to which we're using reserves, and I guess my time is up.
Thank you. The first thing I would really stress in the budget, and parts of this may be there, but it's a bit hard to determine at the end of the day, the library ought to be open on Sunday, in my judgment. I think the library is a superb facility. We spent a lot of money, quite wisely, to renovate it. It's run by a great staff. It's used by everyone in town, and I think it should be open as much as possible on Sunday. The numbers I have heard are that it would cost about $30,000 to make that happen, and in a budget of $72 million, I think that's a priority the town at all levels and at all departments should commit to. So I would recommend that as one baseline important item in the budget going forward.
I would reduce the data management budget, which next year will be approximately $385,000, a lot of which is outside consultants. I think we've overspent in the software area and have not achieved any personnel reductions as a result. We've spent over $1 million since 2002, haven't yet fully implemented the municipal system. I would encourage and prepare the transfer station for conversion to its pay-as-you-throw system, whereby I think we will reduce the transfer station budget, which is about $475,000, and promote more equitable charges to residents based on the trash that they eliminate. And finally, I would eliminate a single item on the town manager's budget, which is $3,000 every year that's in there for food and groceries, and just personally annoys me. I would use those additional funds to fund the town planner position, put more dollars back into education, which has an $800,000 deficit. It's going to see class sizes of 30 kids in the 5th grade. I would divert those dollars to the planner position for the planning board, and also for additional funds for education in Winchester.
This next question will begin with Mr. Berman responding first. How does the town measure productivity? Who manages productivity in the town organization?
This is a subject that's discussed at the Finance Committee every year, and I would say that we don't, to the extent that we don't do it well, if at all. And then when we've talked about it, for example, town meeting voted to replace all of the water meters in town, and it was represented that that expenditure would result in the reduction of 1 in head count, that we wouldn't have to have as many water meter readers because these would be done automatically. That has not happened. We continue to ask about it. It has not happened. School crossing guards, we attempted to cut that last year. Town meeting put those funds back. This year, in the new budget year with limited funds, school crossing guards are being cut. We had school crossing guards standing at corners where no kids were crossing. We're wondering who's looking out for this. And so productivity, it's an important issue. It is hard to measure, but there are some very apparent places where we can do better.
Thank you. I would start by saying I think the king of the productivity chart, if you will, has got to be the town manager. That's part of his and his department's job. To the extent there are issues there, and there are, I think it's up to the Board of Selectmen to bring them forward and address them. I think it's very important that the Board of Selectmen understand the nitty-gritty of how the town runs, though I recognize the constraints of being a volunteer board and not having a full-time opportunity to do that. I also would want to say in response to one of my colleagues' comments here that I do not support pay-as-you-throw at the transfer station. I think it is the most inequitable possible system. Everybody who uses the dump already pays twice. We pay once in property taxes and once with the $150 sticker that we all buy, and I think it is inappropriate and misleading to suggest that it would be fair and more equitable to charge everybody per bag of trash, and I would oppose that.
The question, as I remember it now, was who measures productivity? Productivity is measured by department heads at each department. So the chief of police, the chief of the fire department, chief of DPW. There are 680 employees in town. Other than the school department, nobody has 100 employees. The school department has 435 employees of those 680. Productivity in the school basis is measured first by the superintendent, then by building principals, then by teachers and department heads, and there is a very well-detailed plan which evaluates each teacher on a year-by-year basis. I do not think that there is enough of an effort globally to have department heads reporting back to the town manager and to implement best business practices in terms of what results we can achieve. I think we need to look at every position and measure it against all the other needs and apply the values of those of the community to those needs in those positions.
Thank you. In terms of measuring productivity, it's pretty evident, I think, when you take a look around and understand what's happened to the budgets over the past 15 and 20 years. The DPW budget, for example, has 30 less employees, and yet they're still functioning. The town manager's FY07 budget includes $15,000 for a benchmarking program, which will help us identify efficiencies. In addition to that, if you just take a look at the comptroller's office, the budget in the last 10 years went from $50 million to $72 million. And with the implementation of Munis, you may say there's no savings there, but the fact of the matter is there's no additional personnel. So if you're looking for efficiencies, you have to understand that there are less employees doing more work, and so, I think the benchmarking program will help us really identify that stuff. Thank you.
Then the next question will begin with Ms. Burkhart. Speaking of the town manager, we have a professional town manager. How carefully will you listen? How amenable to his advice will you be?
I think the town manager is probably one of the 2 or 3 most important employees in the town. I'd put on the same level the superintendent of schools, because I think they run the 2 departments, the 2 branches of the town that make it all work. I think it's essential that the board have a great relationship with the person in that job, and I think it's essential that the person in that job really get into the details. I'm a corporate lawyer. I negotiate for a living. I am often on the other side of complex commercial transactions, and so the detail that you have to know, the way you have to be able to look at a balance sheet and look at a contract and tear it apart and see where the issues are and see what you can save, that's essential, and we really need to do that. The town has some very complex commercial financial situations it enters into, and it needs to do so with good advice and good knowledge going into them.
Sure, I would listen very carefully and provide the town manager with, I think, a lot of operational responsibility, which is appropriate. It's not the job of Board of Selectmen to manage every detail in a $72 million budget. That being said, it is the job of the Board of Selectmen to evaluate the town manager and to provide the town manager with direction and to provide the town manager with some benchmarks himself so that every year the town manager has some goals. We're spending, $383,000 in software and software maintenance. What personnel gains are we realizing? With respect to the changes that we are making and programs that we might make, what are other communities doing? There are 101 communities in Massachusetts using pay-as-you-throw, 4,000 communities throughout the country. Let's look at other types of other municipal governments. What changes are they making? Let's study those and report back. So I would pay great attention to the town manager, be respectful of his opinions, but I also would take an active role in evaluating his performance and setting benchmarks as you do for any employee.
Mr. Nurnberger.
Thank you. I had the pleasure of actually hiring Mel Kleckner, the new town manager, and we hired Mel because he had very good credentials, and we felt that he'd be a strong town manager. So I think that as a member of the Board of Selectmen, we would, you do support the town manager, but there are times, of course, when issues come up that you may think that the town manager may need more policy direction, but for the most part, I think that the Board of Selectmen should really be policy directive, not get into the daily management of the town's affairs. So, and by the way, I do support the pay-as-you-throw for the transfer station. I think it's an element along with the transfer station stickers that would make that a more equitable use for all of our citizens. So, thank you.
Thank you. One of the things that I've talked about in this campaign is my business background, but also my experience here with town committees. And I've seen a number of different Board of Selectmen, and I've seen 3 different town managers. And this town manager is new. I think he's doing a good job. He's interacted well with the Finance Committee. I think the Board of Selectmen have to be more of a board of directors, as one of the other speakers said. You need to set goals and priorities, and then you need to hold the town manager accountable. The town manager recently had a 1-year performance review, received a 5-0 vote of endorsement from this board. And yet, days later, this board, the current board, voted 3-2 against his budget. You work with the town manager. There should be a way to reach consensus, and there shouldn't be this divergence that is confusing to the voters, that 3 different votes against that budget had 3 different reasons, and some of the reasoning was internally inconsistent. You work with your town manager. He is the executive of the town, and I think the board should work more as a board of directors for the town.
And this next question will begin with Mr. Haley. How urgent, central to you, is the concept of hiring Winchester's own for positions?
Well, being one of Winchester's own, I feel I should say very urgent, but in fact, the answer is not urgent at all. I think that for every position we have, we need to go out and find the person who can best serve the needs of community. When we're hiring a football coach, we need to hire someone who can be the best coach to the students and best serve the students on that team and in the school system. Same thing when we're hiring teachers or anyone else. When we're undertaking the effort to hire a new police chief, I think it's important that when we have people who are internal candidates, that we encourage that. And I think that it's appropriate that internal candidates have some weight because they do have some experience which is relevant. But it's not a question of choosing somebody just because they're from Winchester if there's another candidate who's more competent and who can better serve the citizens or the people in that particular program. I think we need to encourage people in town. When we have people who live here in town, I think it makes the community better and all of us better, but I don't think that we can give any credit to someone at the expense of the people who participate in the program.
Mr. Nurnberger?
Thank you. I believe that you, where possible, should promote from within. I agree with Peter Haley that it obviously should be the most qualified candidate, but I really believe that a lot of weight should be given to citizens that have dedicated their life's work to the community. So I would heavily weight promoting from within. We're about to, I guess, choose a new police chief, and I think that job should stay in civil service. And if there's a qualified candidate that's in the system, in the ranks of the Winchester Police Department, they should be given serious consideration. Thank you.
Thank you. I think that you're looking for the best people for the job. With regard to whether they're a town resident or not, I don't have a problem using that as a tiebreaker, but that would not be my first go-to point. One of the problems that we have throughout the town, the schools included, is that Proposition 2.5 over a succession of years has hollowed out our departments. And we don't have a lot of new people coming into these departments who know how they do it in another town or in another business or in another place. We're looking for best practices. We're looking for efficiencies. And I think you gain that by spreading the net as wide as you can. And I did not grow up in Winchester. I've lived here by choice for 24 years. And if people want to work for Winchester and give us their best efforts, I think we ought to consider them. Thank you.
Thank you. I think it has become perhaps more the norm in Washington to pay to play. I think that's a terrible concept. I think the problem with the football coach process was exactly the process. I think if a wealthy individual in town demands that he be made part of that process and be part of the decision, I would have hoped that the response from the school administration would have been, thank you for your views, we're interested in them, but you're not going to drive the process. We don't need our own Jack Abramoff in Winchester. I think it is very helpful to have people who look at the people who've worked in town, but it is the process, ladies and gentlemen. It is breaking open this closed group of people who have made many decisions and kept out another point of view. I would also suggest to you that there is tremendous value in putting everybody at the table. There is value in saying we want to hear what you have to say and we are interested in the other points of view. Facts are not something to be afraid of. They're something to be embraced and on which you can build a decision that will cause everybody to follow you when that decision has been made.
This next question is asking all the candidates, and we'll begin with Mr. Nurnberger, for your views on the Conservation Act as written, specifically preservation and maintenance of preservation, or just preservation and maintenance?
Well, the Board of Selectmen has, on a number of occasions, supported the preservation of certain parcels of land. So I think that wherever you can, preservation is important. Obviously, you know, land for the most part is owned by individuals, and when they buy these parcels, they buy along with that, they buy the rights to develop or do whatever they wish. We would encourage, wherever possible, that individuals that have parcels of open space, if they wish to either donate them or preserve them through a Preservation Act, that's something the Board of Selectmen has, will, in the past and will continue to support.
Could you clarify the question? Are you asking about the state's Preservation Act or how we act on preservation? Town Conservation Act? Oh. Okay. I'm for conservation. We should conserve more. Well, let me say that we have limited open land. We're subject to the state's Waterfront Act and the Wetlands Act. We're seeing that in practice with the planning board right now, working with a hospital on a very difficult site. We have a bike path that we could be doing more with. We've just gotten a new floodplain designation for downtown. It's going to guide us. This really ties back, if we're going to talk about conservation, to the need for a master plan and to understand what is developable and what is not. We've had conversations recently about the need for a new high school, and Chacha Field has been considered. Chacha Field is not a place where we can build a high school because it is in a floodplain. Therefore, a master plan that begins to look totally at the town begins to inform the decisions you make. So I think everybody who values the town and the town we live in is for conservation. It's how we apply it and recognize it.
I would also say conservation is an excellent concept and one you would want to apply whenever you can, but you want to always look at some of the dollar issues that the town has perhaps not dealt with as it might have. If you look at the Pansy Patch, that chunk of land across from Mahoney's, 7 acres of buildable land just sold for $7 million, that land was assessed as agricultural and farmland for better than 30 years. Now, 25 years ago, they did grow flowers on it, but they haven't done that in decades, and one wonders why that assessment hadn't changed. Similarly, when you look at the Lock Farm property up by St. Eulalia's, which is 14 or 19 acres, huge chunk of property, also assessed as farmland, which means very low revenues for the town, and they haven't grown anything on it except for a few raspberries for a week in August, as long as I can remember. So there are places where you can look across the town and preserve bits of open space, but also make sure that the revenue stream that we are all working very hard to maximize is used appropriately.
I kind of enjoy the raspberry picking myself. I'm not sure I quite understand the question, for which I apologize. I certainly share everyone's interest in promoting conservation and recognize that the town is built out and that we have difficult choices in terms of using remaining property. I've previously stated my support of a town planner which I think would be germane to this issue as well.
This next question will begin with Mr. Berman. Do you support the real estate transfer tax or support buying? Actually, the original question, it's a little crossed out here. Do you support the real estate transfer tax that has been proposed?
No, I don't. I don't support that. I believe, in managing our budget, we're going to have future overrides, and I think that's just the truth that we need to talk about in this campaign. We need to lay out there for people. The question about fiscal management and fiscal reporting and credibility of the numbers that I've been talking about in this campaign go to how big an override and how far out into the future can you push an override. And people are already paying an awful lot in taxes. I have great concern for that. People are being literally priced out of Winchester. Median house prices are interesting, but it's not what a lot of people in Winchester paid for their house. It's on paper. And if you sold your house, you'd need to live someplace. I think that the transfer tax is not something that I could support.
I think what they're referring to is the transfer tax, the 2% trans tax that was brought before town meeting a couple of years ago by my opponent, Mr. Haley, to charge every Winchester homeowner an additional 2% upon the sale of his or her home. I think it's a terrible idea. We all pay huge property taxes year in and year out, and we would all have, in addition, state and federal tax hits upon the sale of property. So I would not support that tax in any shape or form.
I was on the school committee from 1998 to 2004, and at that time I saw special education growing exponentially, enrollment growing exponentially, and I knew that the community was not going to support a series of overrides sufficient to fund education in Winchester. I knew what education meant to the citizens of Winchester. I saw from talking to people that the pressures on them were that they had homes with great value which had accrued but did not have present income to pay real estate taxes. The real estate tax, the property tax is a regressive tax. My proposal was this: seek a home rule petition in the state legislature, not which would impose a real estate transfer tax, but would allow the citizens to vote to decide whether or not, instead of a series of override proposals, they might prefer a tax that when they sold their home, the buyer would pay a transfer tax equal to 2% or less based on what the community and the selectmen decided on the sale of that home. Don't need to pay the tax going forward, but would allow it to pay it at sale. It's the only proposal which is an alternative to overrides. It's not an issue for us. Went to the state legislature, I advocated for it there, and the realtors in Winchester and the realtors throughout the Commonwealth opposed it strongly, defeated it in the Ways and Means Committee. It's a dead letter issue. I think it was a good decision, and I'm proud that I supported it.
Thank you. I did not support the transfer tax in its current form, but I think some credit has to be given to Mr. Haley here a bit to think out of the box a little bit. Obviously, we've put questions, override questions on the ballot, and they continue to fail. So some new thinking was needed. I think Peter came up with a creative idea. I don't think that the 2% on the gross of the sale of a property was the right way to go, but in these times, these challenging budget times, creative thinking is necessary. And so, again, I didn't support it, but, it was an idea that had some merit.
We have received several questions that are directed to specific candidates. As agreed upon, since this is Ms. Burkhart's time to start first, I will ask this to her specifically, and the other candidates will have the same amount of time to respond should they choose to. To Ms. Burkhart, what is your position on the town manager and the budget for the schools? How do you propose to support and maintain the excellence of our schools?
The school department is hugely important. It's hugely important. It's one of the reasons people come here. It's one of the reasons the town has a great reputation. Having said that, it should not be exempt from the kind of questions and thoughtful overview that every other department has. I've spent the last 2 months talking with a whole range of parents and teachers and citizens, and the comment that keeps coming back to me is There is so much that could be done internally, but everybody's afraid to suggest it because there is a climate that says if you're not with us, you're disloyal and we won't listen to what you have to say. I think that's just not helpful. I could think of 3 things you could do in the school budget that would immediately save some money and would have no impact at all on the teachers. You could reduce the amount of busing we provide. We provide hundreds of thousands of dollars of busing, some of which is mandated by the state, some of which is not. You could reduce the administrative overhead in the superintendent's office, which has gone up by 15% in the last 2 years. The current superintendent budget adds a copy clerk and an additional administrative person under the current budget that's being funded, and yet we hear all the discussion about the problems with the classrooms and the teachers. Sorry.
Sure. Just so we're clear, let's start with the facts. We do not provide any support of the busing program other than what's required by state law. We can't avoid that. Last year, the students and the parents in the Winchester Public School System paid almost $4 million in the form of athletic fees, fees for instrumental music, fees for busing, and voluntary contributions to the school system. There isn't any way we're going to maintain the excellence of the Winchester Public School System unless we continue to receive those fees, seek and receive those voluntary contributions, and we start making decisions about the whole budget based on, instead of having one side town, one side education, we look at every need and compare it to every other need and not say, these are town dollars, these are school dollars. I don't agree that there's any climate of fear or there's anyone unwilling to speak up in Winchester about what concerns them. I think that we see it when there is an issue which really concerns people, they turn out in force. And I participated in that process for 6 years, and I think it was an open process.
Thank you. The one issue that concerns me with regards to the school budget really is the health insurance, and I guess the school committee is beginning negotiations with the Winchester Teachers Association, and hopefully some good will come out of that. But again, the school committee and Dr. Marini came to the Board of Selectmen and made a compelling case that enrollments are increasing at 9% and every other community is 4%. And so I think that based on that compelling need, you have to take a look at the education budget. These kids that enter first grade, they're there for 1 year. They don't get a second opportunity. And so I think that the most compelling need right now is teachers in the school system. So I would, that's my answer. Thank you.
Well, I think the question was on the support or where I stand on the town manager's recommendation to the Finance Committee in their budget. I'm supportive of what he's done. I don't think it's enough, but I'm hard-pressed to find the additional dollars to do more for the schools, which should be done. The schools are now getting a 5.6% increase over last year. Municipal is getting approximately a 1% increase over last year. Again, my involvement with the Finance Committee over the last 6 years, I have found the school committee in recent years to be very proactive. Their budget process, frankly, in many ways surpasses the town side budget process in terms of really drilling down and looking what their priorities are. They've done an excellent job on that. The library has done an excellent job on that. And so I'm supportive of the town manager's budget, but currently it's $863,000 short of what the schools are asking for. And just a point of clarification, a copy clerk was being asked for by the high school. It has not been funded, and I doubt that it will be funded. It is definitely not in the superintendent's office, which is, frankly, leaner than it should be. Thank you.
Thank you. It's now Mr. Haley's turn to respond first, and there are 2 questions that I'm combining. They're quite similar. First of all, there was a comment, impressive knowledge and passion around the school issues. Will you be able to balance that, especially with town-wide needs? And then this other question, we are in difficult fiscal times, and there has been concern about financial transparency and fairness in our budgeting process. How can you assure us that you will be fair and balanced as a selectman if elected and will work as part of the team?
I think the jobs of the Board of Selectmen and the school committee are elementally different. The school committee is charged with reporting to the town meeting and the citizens what it costs to educate the children in the Winchester public school system. I think I was an effective advocate for those children, their parents, and the town as a whole as a member of the school committee. I think that the Board of Selectmen is essentially a leadership board. I think I can bring those same skills, the same ability to analyze financial information, to convey it to others in a persuasive manner, and the same amount of financial acuity to the issues which face the town. One thing I think it's important for us to recognize is that we had an override. Everyone ran around and said we need more accountability. While we were doing that, the audit for the year ending June 30th, 2004 was not completed for 18 months until December 2005. And the response was, we should have an audit committee by the Board of Selectmen. Good response, I think. We had a vote the other night. The vote was 3-2. They're voting against having outside people on the audit committee. I think that's wrong. We need to have transparent, open, timely, and complete financial information. We can't have people who run around town and say they're not telling us the truth, Mr. O'Connor, who then vote against having outside people on the audit committee. It's not right.
Mr. Nurberger, any response?
Yeah, I do have a response. The selectmen did vote to establish an in-house audit committee. We did a survey of 14 communities, none of which they had town manager, form of government had an audit committee, but we felt that we should do something about it. It is true, the 04 audit was 18 months late, but the 05 audit was completed in 9 months. So we're making a lot of progress in that. The other thing I'd like to say is that each year the audit is completed by an outside independent auditing firm, and it's been that way every year since. The audits are on the website, and as far as transparency, I really don't understand that issue. The Board of Selectmen, the Town Manager's Office, and the Controller provided town meeting in the fall with the most comprehensive financial document ever given to town meeting members. If that's not transparency, I don't know what is.
Okay, Mr. Berman,
Thank you. I've used as my theme in this campaign, one town, and that really is born from my involvement with a lot of town committees, including the Finance Committee, where you do have to look at competing needs and you have to balance. You know, somebody said to me, if my house was on fire, I'd want more money at the fire department. If somebody was breaking my house, I'd want more policemen on the street. If my kid was going into a third grade class with 30 kids, I'd want more money for the schools. And that's what we face. We have to strike that balance. We need financial management and leadership, not just in the spring. The 3-2 vote against the town manager's budget, the one comment that was consistent in the 3 no votes was, gee, I wish we had more time for the process. You've been there for a year. You just gave the guy a 5-0 vote of confidence. Where did the time go? It's on a daily basis that you do this. We were told we needed an override, then we were told we had enough money. Now we're told we don't have enough money. I think it's very confusing for the voters, and I think it's a daily task of the Board of Selectmen to articulate our financial condition and to lead.
I listened to all the comments about openness and accuracy and transparency, particularly from my opponent, Mr. Haley, and I think, boy, we're having a lot of conversions on the road to Damascus here. It's terrific if it were the case, but unfortunately the library hasn't been funded on Sunday for 3 or 4 years by town meeting, and many of my opponents voted against opening that building on Sunday. I would also suggest that the core issue here, voters of Winchester, is the credibility of the people who are spending your money. That's the issue. When credibility goes up, people will give you more money to spend. Several years ago, there was a general override that incorporated what was called a building stabilization fund. There was much discussion at the time, including by my opponent, Mr. Haley, who was on the school committee, saying that fund would be a lockbox, and it would be untouchable, and it would be put aside to be used for the next renovation of the next school building. Sensible concept. The voters funded it. We now have $7 million in that account, and in the WinCam interviews that were recently taped and are now airing, my opponent suggested that perhaps we should find a way to tap into that fund. And I suggest to you, voters of Winchester, that's exactly why nobody wants to give you any more money. Because if you say you're going to do A and you don't, they won't listen to you. We've got to fix the credibility gap. Thank you.
The next question, the first respondent is Mr. Nurnberg, and this was directed specifically to you. What reason compelled the Board of Selectmen to sell Winning Farm for $1.5 million?
Well, interesting question. The fact of the matter is the Board of Selectmen brought that warrant article to the floor of town meeting. The $1.5 million was an original price given, sale price for 145 units. The deal changed. The developer negotiated a reduction in units to 88 units. The Board of Selectmen had a opinion of value done. We brought all that information to town meeting, and town meeting supported the 88 units. I happened to make a minority report on the floor of town meeting. I thought the property was worth more. Even with the 88 units, it was worth $2.2 million, but you know, at some point, you have to learn to accept the wishes of town meeting. Town meeting members represent their neighborhoods. They're voted and elected into office, and so town meeting overwhelmingly supported the 88 units for $1.5 million. So that's what happened. And
Well, I'm not sure about the fair market value, but it was certainly a tortured process over a 10-year period. But I spoke on the floor of town meeting about Winning Farm on more than one occasion. At the end of the day, the town meeting voted 3 times to support the Winning Farm proposal. At the end of the day, the Conservation Commission and the Zoning Board of Appeals approved it. One of the things we're getting out of Winning Farm is 10 units of elderly housing, the first new units in 20 years. Was it a perfect process? Absolutely no. Do I think there's a lot to criticize? Yes, I do. I think there's serious process questions that were raised along the way. But I'm at the point where I hope the rest of the town is, that Winning Farm is in our rearview mirror at this point. Hopefully we're going to get the project built. It hasn't closed as yet, and funds will be coming into the town that we desperately need, and I do think it's time to move on. I would have handled it differently.
I think Winning Farm sums up a lot of things that have been very wrong and badly handled in the last 10 years. The critical vote in Winning Farm, with all respect to Mr. Nurnberger, is not the town meeting vote. It was the Board of Selectmen vote in January of 2002 when they extended the original contract for 5 years for free. The original purchase and sale agreement would have expired in August of 2003. In August of 2003, no harm, no foul, nobody could have sued anybody. The board could have bid the process again. They could have bid the land again. They could have bid it with the same requirements for an assisted living facility and so forth, and the same buyer could have made an offer. He just would have had to have made an offer that was many millions of dollars higher. So I think Winning Farm represents the classic case of selling a town asset, because the land belongs to the town of Winchester, ladies and gentlemen. It belongs to all of us, and it has been sold. At the end of the day, the net input into the town's coffers, based on the last Winchester Star story, will be roughly $167,000. For 12 and a half acres of land, we were badly served.
can I respond? I'd like to, because Ms. Burkhardt brought up the... Thank you very much. I actually did support... Thanks, Peter. I actually did support the extension of the purchase and sale agreement with the developer because at the time, I believed it was the right thing to do. The developer agreed to build 145 units of assisted living with 20% affordable, counting towards Chapter 40B requirements. The Board of Appeals issued the developer a special permit, and the neighborhood appealed the Board of Appeals decision, all of which is completely legal and part of the process. It's a part of the process that I support. The Board of Selectmen believed we had an agreement with the developer that was supported by town meeting. Support was evident on a number of occasions because town meeting supported through the warrant articles. Because of the appeal and through no fault of the developer, the clock was ticking. An extension was an appropriate thing to do. Sometimes being a selectman means making the unpopular decision. A selectman must have the strength to do the right thing, even if it is unpopular.
The Winchester League of Women Voters is a nonprofit organization that promotes informed participation in all levels of government. We hold forums with political candidates and on issues like flood control. We register eligible voters at the high school, honor town employees at an annual lunch. Our members are women and men 18 years and up. Our activities are designed to fit busy lives.
We'll begin with Mr. Berman. Could you please give your view of the process to be followed in the development of available land? directed to you specifically.
Well, we have an established process, and anybody who comes into town is generally represented by council, and they know what that process is. I think we can do a better job as a town to anticipate these developments. There's very little open land in town. The Pansy Patch should not come to us as some kind of an epiphany that somebody is going to buy it and want to develop something there. I think, again, the need for a master plan is to think about these things in advance. What would you like to see there? It's on busy Cambridge Street. Would you like to see commercial? The people on Salisbury Road are very fearful that their road's going to be extended through there. I serve on Winter Pond Committee. We're concerned about runoff, and we've been doing a lot to try to protect and enhance Winter Pond. We worked actively as a neighborhood on the Hess gas station and got a lot of oil separation drains and other improvements, sidewalks for the town. And so there is an established process. And the planning board in the last year or two has really begun to do a very proactive job when people come to them, and I would leave it with the planning board.
I think, as Mr. Berman has said, there's a process that's out there. I would add a couple of hopes for the future. The first is that the number of executive sessions that take place in various boards around town are reduced. There are certainly moments when those are appropriate, usually when you're talking about some personnel issue. But in my experience, many of those executive sessions get used as a camouflage. It's kind of human nature to want to talk about things in private, and the excuse that's often proffered is that they are legal matters and therefore they can't be discussed publicly. I think that ought to be opened up a little bit. I think sunlight is an excellent concept. I think meetings and disclosure and bringing everybody into the process only help and assist the town across the board, and that's what I would support.
The development process, as the other panelists have noted, is defined by the town regulations and state law. It's a statutory process, and it's fairly well developed within Winchester. I think one of the things that, with respect to the development process, we should focus on is what would we like to see developed in Winchester. I know that the business community has a strong interest in the classification issue, and obviously a strong self-interest in that, appropriately enough. But I think one of the things we need to do is to reach out not only to the business community, but also to other non-governmental organizations in town. Work with the hospital, as I think the board has done a good job of doing, work with the Griffin Museum and other people within town and say, what would we like the town to look like 10, 20, 30 years from now? And once we define those goals, what's the best way for us to reach those goals? But I think it's important that in conjunction with the planning effort and the planner, that we define those goals, that we have a conversation about what they are, and that we work towards those goals instead of just saying, well, we'll react to things as they happen.
Mr. Nuremberg.
Thank you. I think the master plan will be very helpful in redeveloping Winchester and looking at what the needs are in the future. I think if there's one criticism I have with the process, it's the zoning bylaws, which are very confusing, and it adds a lot of cost and time in the process. So I think that one thing the planning board could do with regards to the process is really take a look at the zoning bylaws and maybe codify them and update them. They're just all over the place, and so I think that the planning board's actually done a pretty good job with the Winchester Hospital on Washington Street, with the Immaculate Conception on Main Street. I think they've been proactive. They have resources today that when I was a planning board member and the chairman, we did not have. So I think that makes them more effective.
This next question will begin with Ms. Burkhart, and this individual began with a quote from Sustainable Winchester saying, sustainability broadly defined as, quote, meeting the needs of the present generation without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their needs. Do you have any ideas on how we can increase our level of sustainable living in Winchester?
I do, and I think that's a terrific quote because it sums up the challenge of government week in and week out. Everybody has all kinds of legitimate requests. The budget is never as big as you would like it to be. The challenge is to balance and to decide what you want to do. I come back to the credibility issue to the voters and to everybody listening, because I think this is a town of great goodwill. It is a town of great resources. And when people believe that the government is being operated in a way that they are comfortable and happy with, that it's open, that it's inclusive, there is going to be much more willingness to participate and step up at every level, financial and otherwise. There is a spirit in Winchester that is valuable and has been under attack recently because of all kinds of issues. I would want to bring that back. It's a town I grew up in. It's a town that is unique in the Commonwealth. Of 396 towns, we are the 5th littlest, or the 391st littlest, however you want to describe that. We have one of the highest tax burdens, but we have a citizenry that is really unparalleled. And it's bridging that gap and those challenges where the board, I think, can really lead and step up, and that's what I would want to do.
I think the question was, what are the things that you could do to promote sustainability in Winchester? I have two answers in my 60 seconds. The first, pay as you throw. The studies on pay as you throw indicate that it reduces wastes that is disposed of between 14 and 17%, and it increases recycling between 32 and 59%. It's a great program. It falls into the sustainable Winchester issues, and I think is one that we should follow. The second thing I would recommend is that the City of Portland, Maine has a great program that they're encouraging seniors to retire their cars. They then take the cars and use them to use the value of the cars to create a car service where people volunteer to drive seniors around. They get fewer cars on the road, fewer uses of automobiles and necessary emissions, and at the same time provide a nice service to seniors who might not want to continue to drive anymore. They're able to take their car, which they can no longer use, donate it to this program, and then take advantage of the program by signing up for and calling for rides. It's a great program they put in place up in Portland, and one I think we should look into.
Thank you. I think that as far as sustainability here in Winchester, there's a couple of things that really hurt us here. When we proposed the override in 2002, $4.5 million override, I think $2.5 million of that money went to operating, and then the next year the state reduced our state funding by $1 million. And it's not unrealistic for people to say, well, geez, we gave you an override, and now you can't sustain the services that we want. I hope that the Planning Board's master plan will guide us in the future. I agree with Mr. Haley. I think energy conservation and recycling at the transfer station will help. But I also think we need to look at the state in terms of sustainability here in Winchester for their state mandates. They create all these laws. Health insurance, for example, they play by a different set of rules as it relates to controlling their health insurance costs, and yet they won't allow us in Winchester to play by the same rules. So I think that we need to look to our state senator and representative to help us here in Winchester.
Again, going back to the original question, in terms of sustainability, we have one of the lowest recycling rates in the state at our transfer station. And yet, if you've been there on a Saturday, you see how many people would like to recycle, who get into that scrum of cars of 3 and 4 deep. Having been on the Solid Waste Study Committee, we need some capital investment at the transfer station in order to attain some of the increases in recycling that would help us. It would help our bottom line if we weren't hauling that trash. We could do more to encourage that. Energy conservation, I've already mentioned that. That is an issue that each family in Winchester has been dealing with, and the town really has not come to that party. We can be talking about our fleet. You can't change that overnight, but as you buy new vehicles, what are the vehicles you're buying? Why are we using used police cars that are getting 9 and 10 miles a gallon to use for a health inspector? Should we be doing something else? Other cities and towns are doing that. And then finally, manage a master plan that looks at the downtown and what can we do more in the downtown to encourage walking and public transportation.
Now this next question will begin with Mr. Haley. And this is a quote apparently in the Globe today. The planning director in Woburn said the following about development, quote, "It gets to the point where it's beyond the realm of reasonable development." end quote. Has development in Winchester's north end reached that point in light of the condo development, gridlock traffic, and congestion? How would you address these issues?
Well, I think the planning board has made some attempts through the master plan and in other ways to try and address the issues and to plan out the development. As I said, my primary response to these questions is I think that we should fund and implement a town planner position to look at how we're developing different areas of town and to go from there. You know, with respect to the development process, it is what it is. Unless we take some proactive steps to plan for the future, we're going to have to be simply responding to those opportunities or those things that are presented to us. I do think that we have the ability to do that, and we should be planning it out and relieving the congestion on North Main Street and in other areas of the town.
Thank you. As a member of the Planning Board from 97 to 2000, the Planning Board rezoned or went to town meeting with a warrant article to rezone North Main Street into two sections, GBD2, which is from Skillings Road to Swanton Street, and GBD3, which is from Swanton Street to Cross Street. What we did is we recognized what the street really was, and from Skillings Road to Swanton Street, it was more car-oriented type businesses. And of course, from Swanton Street to Cross Street, it was more residential. So we did recognize what the street really was. We felt that those were the strengths of the street. And of course, the Immaculate Conception is now has been sold, and the owner developer is will be looking for a zoning change up at GBD3. I hope that town meeting will listen to them. I think that GBD3 made sense when the planning board proposed it at town meeting, and it passed on town meeting. So I think that the planning board has done some good work with zoning, and there's a perfect example of it. Thank you.
This is a question that really goes again to process. It almost ties back in some ways to the Winning Farm question before. There is a neighborhood there that's been active. They were active in the rezoning before. Now the church is being sold, or it has been sold, and the current buyers are looking to take a piece and hold it as a daycare center and sell off the rest. This is where, what are our values? What do we want to see up there? And part of the values is listening to the people who live in that neighborhood. It also is a call for the planning board in all of these proposals to talk about traffic and to ask the would-be developer or proposer of changes to give us a traffic study. We don't have the funding to do that. What are the implications? What do we need to do in terms of bolstering it? We were late to the game on Cambridge Street. People on Everett Avenue got organized, got their own traffic consultant. There's something in many communities, we're talking about traffic calming, not traffic throughput. That should be part of the conversation too. But I think it's very important that the neighborhood voice be heard up there. And I believe there will be two differing proposals at Springtown meeting regarding that parcel.
Thank you. I think that whole sort of Precinct 8 and all the neighborhoods that flow off Main Street are really on the cusp right now, and it's really important that the town treat them with care and with deference to the residents who live there. I have a specific and a general comment. The specific one is the town has some good staff, and we might beef up some of these departments to make sure that some of our existing bylaws are enforced. We have height limits on buildings, which are not always honored, particularly with some of the new construction. You would want the building inspector to make a thorough inspection of a new property, not get out of his car and leave the engine running. With regard to some of the current uses up in Precinct 8, many of them are non-conforming, and I would disagree with Mr. Nurnberger that GBD3 makes a lot of sense. You can put things in a GBD3 district like a bus station and an electric transformer station that I don't think anybody would want to see off Main Street, and I would urge the town to be thoughtful as they go forward and listen to the residents.
I'd just like to respond. In GBD3, you cannot put a bus station or a transfer station. Those are the anomalies that are on Main Street. The telephone building is an anomaly up there. It's a grandfathered use. GBD3 is a mixed use. It is a retail, small commercial with residential component. It's not anything but that, and I would suggest that you read the zoning.
Anyone else want to respond? This next question will begin with Mr. Nurnberger. What is your position on coalition bargaining for health benefits for our town employees?
Well, the town manager has brought to the Board of Selectmen an initiative, Section 32, for coalition bargaining, and we really haven't taken a position. Quite frankly, we don't know enough about the details to do that. There have been a couple of communities in Massachusetts that have tried it. They've modified Section 32 with a sunset provision. I think that it's something that needs more study, and I'm not fully aware of all of the little intricacies, but it is certainly an idea that's worth evaluating.
Mr. Nurnberger touched on one recent proposal, and he also made mention earlier to a fact that people need to understand the state doesn't have to negotiate with their union employees on health benefits the same way cities and towns do. It's inherently unfair. It's costing us a lot of money. Our health care costs for the town are up 68% in the last 5 years. Health benefits are in the municipal side of the budget. That's teachers, that's town workers, that's everybody. And in that those costs are going up, even while we've had, particularly on the municipal side, the same number or less employees, we have more people on our health care plans, because as the private sector has changed co-pays and prescription benefits, individual families are making rational economic decisions at their individual kitchen tables, and whole families are moving on to the Winchester plan because the spouse's plan is tightening up and cities and towns are not. Every community is facing this, and I support anything that will begin to try to bring those benefits, those costs, in line with our revenue growth.
The challenge is, as Mr. Berman has indicated, that healthcare in the public sector is not where healthcare in the private sector is, in the sense that it is still much more subsidized on the public side, and that is a huge, huge cost that is going up at astronomical rates. It's a challenge because it's a personal issue, and it's a people issue, and it's an employee morale issue, but I think it's unavoidable. And I think, again, you have to look people in the eye, lay out what you've got for dollars, outline what the private sector is doing, and try to find a happy medium that can work for the town. There's just no other alternative.
We provide health care in Winchester to 1,005 people, 325 retirees, 680 active employees. They participate in 6 different plans. 3 of those plans have less than 15 people enrolled in them. I think that's one of the things that we need to look at, and I think if we can make use of coalition bargaining with health care issues, that we should do that. I think the town manager's suggestion is probably a good one. I also think that we do need to recognize that municipal employees who are not making any contribution to health care, much like automobile employees in Detroit, are going to have to face the reality that everyone's health care costs are going up, and that as the town's costs go up from $3 million in 2001 to $6.4 million next year, employees are going to have to make a contribution to that. But it's not a zero-sum game here. As employees are required to make a greater contribution to health insurance, employees' effective compensation is going to go down. We're going to have other pressures on the budget. I do think one of the things that I've always thought that we should look at is we have a highly regarded community hospital here. We ought to talk to the hospital, see if there's ways we might not be able to work together to put together a captive-type health plan where we might work to reduce our costs.
Thank you. This next question will begin with Mr. Berman, and it's actually 3 questions that are very closely related. The first has to do with the possible override. Do you think the town will need to pass 1 or more overrides in the next 3 years? If so, how would you approach this? And if not, what alternatives should we pursue to solve our financial deficit? Again, the same question with the limited business taxes. As a selectman, how could you work to acquire increased state funding? And how do you propose to solve the structural deficit of the town's operating budget? And I'll take notes from all of you to take it back to my town, too.
Well, if I have 60 seconds to deal with all those, my answer is yes. Yeah, I mean, I took some notes. You said 3. I stopped at 5. Okay. Great. As I stated before, I'm not running as the candidate for overrides. Don't vote for me because you want an override, you want to pay more taxes. But I've been doing this budget game thing for a number of years now. I've looked at the numbers. I've gone through every department. I've looked at the schools with a demand curve of 9%. Next year, the 5th grades across the town are going to have 30 or more kids in the classes. We are literally out of elementary school classrooms. We're beginning to talk now about adding portables in the systems. We have schools that are bursting at the seams. You can, if you follow some of the things that I've talked about in terms of energy conservation, reining in health benefits, doing all these things, if I could snap my fingers and have them happen Monday morning, it doesn't get you to where you need to be. It's helpful. It would reduce the size of an override. It may push off the date of an override. The number one thing we need to do is build back the credibility with the voters. The last override lost by almost 1,000 votes. That's a message from people saying, I don't believe what you're telling me. I know that the numbers that we're looking at are disastrous for '08. We have $4 million in reserves right now. We're using 2.6 million this year. We replenish that about 800,000 a year. '08 is looking like a car wreck coming at us in terms of what we're going to have to do to that budget and what we're going to have to do to the schools. And I don't think it's responsible for anybody to run and hide from that fact. But what you can do starting Monday morning in every Board of Selectmen's meeting is speak the truth, how bad it is, what it is. People want a youth center. I want a youth center. How are you going to pay for a youth center? It's time to start telling people we don't have the money or that isn't high enough on our list of priorities. I would rather have schools that are educating and have additional services than a youth center. So you're going to have to set priorities. You're going to have to talk honestly about it on a daily basis, build back the credibility, because I do believe you are going to have to support an override in the future.
Thank you. I would not support an override in '07. I would not support an override in '08. In '09, who knows, because the numbers are going to be moving a lot between now and then. But I would suggest that if you look at the town's political landscape, there is a group of people, 20%, 30% more or less, on one side that will always support an override. There's a group of people, 20 or 30% on the other side, that will always oppose an override. In my judgment, the decision and how the elections go come down to the group of people in the middle. And the middle turns on what you are telling them and what happens to the money. The question I hear over and over as I am out campaigning is, where does the money go and where is the reporting on how it got spent? 30 years ago, the school department used to publish a line item budget at the end of the fiscal year. Not the proposals, but what they actually spent the money on. I think that would be hugely helpful because it would show people year over year where the money went. And it would build back, as Mr. Berman said, some of the credibility about how those decisions are being made. I think the state has a big role to play here. And while I would hope that our state representatives could deliver more money, I think perhaps the more likely result is a coalition of cities and towns to say to the governor, the state is actually in pretty decent financial shape on a number of fronts, and some of that is because local aid has been cut, and it would be helpful to have some of that local aid and the Chapter 70 money come back to the town. That, I think, would be essential. I also think I get back to the point about Winchester and the community and how people feel and what people are willing to donate and give voluntarily. When the spirit changes, when there is a sense that there is an openness, that it is not a closed group, I think you're going to see some real differences across the board, and that's what I would really hope for.
I don't think, with respect to the issue of overrides are not generic issues, and the question of will you support an override is more of a political question than a practical one. Right now in Winchester, in March of 2006, the question is both premature and unrealistic. I do think that we need to work harder to figure out the way in which we're going to propose override questions and the way in which we're going to address the issue as a whole. There was a great suggestion in the facts report, which was issued in October of 2000, chaired by Alan McDonald of the Mass Business Roundtable. And in there they said, overrides should not be political questions. Overrides should be purely financial questions. The budget in Winchester is growing annually at a rate of about 4.48%, 4.5% a year, tracking pretty evenly for the last few years. Expenses are growing at about 6 6.5%. If you just track out the available funds, the anticipated budget growth, you can see to meet that 6% number, you're going to need an override somewhere around every 3 years or so. I think we need to work hard to develop those kind of formulas and to look at overrides not as political questions and not as I'm for the children, I'm for the library, and not sort of emotional appeals to everybody, but simply financial questions. This is the rate at which we're spending. These are the resources we have. Do we want to endorse it? I do think we really need to work harder at getting more state aid, and we can be successful at that. State aid was $3.6 million in 2002. It went down about $1 million. It's starting to creep up. It'll be $3.4 million next year, hopefully. Acton has a great proposal. Chapter 70 aid for schools, $2,000 per head for every student. The problem with Chapter 70 education aid in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts right now is it's based on the value of our property and our median income. They say, hey, look, Winchester, your median income is $149,000. You get $4.2 billion of residential property. Solve your own problem. But we can't do that. We can't tax income, and we can't increase the property tax any more than 2.5% a year. It's unrealistic, and it doesn't make any sense. Cities like Cambridge and Somerville have great 2.5 abilities. They're not using them. I think we can work and make some progress as a coalition of communities in addressing this problem.
Mr. Nuremberg.
Thank you. I guess that the truthful answer here is that I think an override is inevitable within the next 3 years. When you think about the state mandates and Prop 2.5, increasing health insurance, I don't really see really any way out of the box. But there are ways to propose an override that may make sense, and I tried to propose this at the Selectmen's table last time we called a question, and that was the menu approach. And I think that as a selectman, I would again make that proposal at the table. I think that if you ask the voters and give them a choice at the ballot is a good thing. And I also believe that if you have a menu, that those individuals who would most likely support an override for DPW or for the library or for public safety or for education would probably vote for all of them. It kind of lifts the boat higher out of the water. So I think with Prop 2.5, the state mandates that are killing us, health insurance, our energy costs, there are some things we can do. There's no question. And I made a proposal on February 9th to reduce the energy budget and to reduce the transfer budget through recycling and energy conservation. But that's just not going to be enough. Deficits for, I think, 08 are $3.8 million and 09's $4.5 million. These are significant deficits. I would commit to you as a selectman to do everything we can to control our costs. And in fact, as a selectman, the Board of Selectmen negotiated with every municipal bargaining unit for reduction in health insurance. And I would hope that the school committee, through their negotiations, would be successful. And so thank you.
Okay. Any other responses again to the same question? Overrides or menu? Okay. And one other question came that related to the school committee, and we'll begin with Ms. Burkhart. What responsibility do you think the Board of Selectmen has for helping to keep our school system strong, and how should or would you work with the school committee?
I think the Board of Selectmen has a huge responsibility, and the first thing I would try to do is persuade the school department to hire someone as the chief of financial operations who is different from the person we have there now. I would encourage the school department to have that person report jointly to the school department and to town meeting. And if that ever happened, and I might be dreaming here, I think you would instantly have a sea change in how people perceive the budget and perceive the school's use of it. As the voters probably know, under state law, town meeting votes a lump sum to the school department. Town meeting cannot direct how the money is actually used. That is the school department's purview. But I think it is so essential that the school department work with the town to understand that it's all our money. You often hear these stories about if an account were allowed to revert to the school department, they would be more careful in how they used the money. If the account reverts to the town, they ought to be equally careful because it's all our dollars. It's all the same picture. It's all the same boat. So I would hope that there could be a sense that the money comes from all of the taxpayers, and how it should be used should be equally, or should be used with equal care, regardless of whether a department gets to keep it at the end of the fiscal year or whether it goes back into the general fund. That's an issue that I think you can also start to solve with good financial management, and I would hope that might be a possibility down the road. Next. Oh. Okay, thank you. Who am I going to? There you go.
The business manager of the Winchester Public School System, for those of you wondering, is a fellow by the name of Sam Rippon. Sam is very engaged in the business affairs of the Winchester Public School System. He's active in school business associations throughout the Commonwealth. He came to us from Tufts University, where he was a financial officer there. I think he does a tremendous job. And I think in general, the school committee does a tremendous job in tracking its expenses. They do publish reports regularly, and they do have a large degree of accountability. In fact, I think so much accountability that they were able to successfully go out in the community and raise over $450,000 last year to support their core mission. I think the Board of Selectmen has an obviously large responsibility with respect to helping the town carry out the mission of education in Winchester. And I think it's silly to talk about education as if it just involves school parents. Collectively, over 98% of us are homeowners. We own $4.2 billion of residential property. The one thing that drives the value of that property is the quality of the Winchester public school system. It's important. We have an obligation to those children, but we also just have a basic financial obligation. In terms of Winchester, governing Winchester, the primary thing we do is run the Winchester public school system. It's a great thing that we do. It's right that we do it. But it also, frankly, if you were charged from the outside of looking at Winchester saying, what should you, as a government official, Winchester, do? Well, you should make sure that you preserve the value of that property. The best thing to do in terms of that is to make sure you preserve the value of the Winchester public school system. I think the selectmen recognize that, and they work towards that, and should continue to do so.
Thank you. I actually agree with Peter on this. I think that a strong educational system certainly does affect the property values. But it's also, I'd like to point out that it's interesting to say in a campaign that I'm for a planner, or I'm for a budget director, or I'm for increased hours at the library. These are all issues that every single selectman I've ever served would support. But the fact of the matter is, when you're looking at $72 million, and if it's a given that all that money is accounted for, and you take a look at the compelling needs of the school system, you know, I would just as soon hire a planner, but what does that mean to the school system with 450 kids in the system? Well, that means a teacher, 1.5 teachers. How about hours at the library? Very important, no question about it. Short money, $30,000. But again, when you take a look, and as a selectman, when you take a look at the compelling needs of the entire community, you have to make choices. Sometimes they're difficult choices. Sometimes they're unpopular choices. But the fact of the matter is, you are obligated as a selectman to represent the entire community, and as a selectman, you make those choices. You make those difficult choices. Thank you.
Thank you. Let me first clarify a point. As a member of the Finance Committee, each year I receive an extremely detailed breakout. It is public information from the school committee. I can tell you what the 5th grade teacher at the Ambrose School is making and how much it increased this year over last year. That person may have moved columns, step and track. They may have gotten additional planning. We've gone through those. We've worked with the school committee to talk about what rate of increases there have been. Dr. Marini's been very responsive to that in the last contract negotiations, using some of the information provided by the Finance Committee. That information is available to every voter, and the school committee does a good job providing it. Second, I said before that the school committee is frankly, in this day, doing a better job, a more detailed job of budget analysis and planning than we are on the municipal side. And they may be doing it because they're motivated by the fact that they're facing the last 5 years, a 9% increase in enrollment. They're up against it, and that is not stopping. Boston Magazine came out, rated the Morocco schools the #1 elementary school in the state. There was a house that hadn't been selling. Suddenly there was a bidding war within a month of that magazine coming out. That's what's going on. We're a victim of our own success. But I would tell you that the succession of years under 2.5 or hollowing out the schools, There's no art, there's no music, there's no elementary librarians. The class sizes are going up. I feel that maybe the school should put a sign in front of it like you have on mutual fund sales reports, that past performance is no predictor of future success. And that's really where we are with the schools. But on the Finance Committee, and Mr. Nurnberger referenced this in terms of selectmen's table, you have to strike a balance. It's one town, and we can't do everything. And we can recognize the pain of the schools and the library and the seniors, and everybody's got to pull together. But it's a real need. It's why I said before, we're going to have some type of an override. We can manage our affairs to try to minimize what that is.
Can I respond just quickly to that? I think, you know, during an election campaign, it's real easy to make statements about financial credibility. It makes a great soundbite, a great campaign tagline. It's real easy to criticize. It's much more difficult to find workable solutions.
I have absolutely no wish to be mean to one particular employee, but this is my point, voters of Winchester. Until you acknowledge, until you stand up and say, we can do something better, you'll never fix the circumstance. The fellow we're talking about at the who runs the finances of the school department is not a certified public accountant. He has never worked for a Big 6 or a Big 8 certified public accounting firm, and his last job before he came here was one of 30 staff accountants at Tufts. I'm sure he's a hell of a guy, but he's not somebody who could be running a $46 million budget or a $50 million budget with the level of confidence that the town requires. And my hope is that before people start shooting the messenger, who raise questions and say, can't we find a better way, that people will look at the management of the town. We can't tax our way out of this problem, everybody. We could have an override every year and we will still have financial management issues because of the cost pressures on the budget. We have to look at how we do business, how we run the departments, do we leave town hall open for 5 days a week? What are the staffing levels across the town on all the municipal sides? That's what we need to, I suggest, think about.
Sure, I'd like to avoid the ad hominem discussions here, but I would just note that earlier there was a comment that the superintendent's budget was overloaded at the administrative level, and now we're talking about going out to recruit somebody to run a $30 million business as a chief financial officer who's had what is now Big 4 accounting experience. So we're going to talk about going out to hire somebody at the private sector at about $250,000 a year. I think that we're doing a fine job. I think, as Mr. Berman spoke from his experience to the Finance Committee, it's not a question of not understanding or grasping the numbers. It's a question of making them add up.
I guess the only other comment I would make on the schools is really the elephant in the parlor here that we're not talking about are personnel costs. We spend 86 cents on every dollar of personnel. And we have a teacher's contract that is coming up, and it is a role, I think, of the selectmen to talk to the school committee offline and in public and say, as you enter into those negotiations, our revenues are growing approximately 4.3% a year historically over the last 5 years. That's about what we can afford. The town of Wilmington just settled for 7.8 over 3 years. I don't know their finances. I know our finances. Coupled with our energy costs, coupled with our rising health benefits, it will be incumbent on the school committee to go into a contract negotiation, which will not be done in public, nor should it be, but we really have to try to ratchet that down. That will save teaching positions and hopefully will help the schools in the long run.
Thank you. There's one question that hasn't been asked. The others have been consolidated, but this leads right into our closing statements. This voter is asking, what ideas, positions do you advocate that set you apart from the other candidates? So you have up to 1 minute in your closing statement, and we're going to reverse the order as we agreed upon and begin with Mr. Nurnberger.
Statement. Thank you. That's a great question. I have advocated many things from the teen center to the flooding and drainage. Winchester's had a rich history of citizens who have participated in government who have made a difference in this community. I believe that for town government to work effectively for us, we must be willing to participate in the process. My passion for Winchester, coupled with my common sense approach and broad experience, makes me uniquely qualified to lead in these challenging times. When I ran for my first term of the Board of Selectmen in 2000, I made a commitment to the citizens to bring a voice of reason, fairness, and balance to the job. By listening carefully to what you had to say and doing my best to represent all the citizens of Winchester, I believe I've kept that commitment. I've made a positive contribution to Winchester to make Winchester a better place for all of us to call home. The next 3 years will be very important to the citizens of Winchester. I promise that I will continue to bring to the Selectmen's table a voice of reason, fairness, and balance. A promise made is a promise kept. Please help me continue this essential work for the future of our community by giving me one of your 2 votes on March 28th. Thank you very much.
I believe that government exists to serve those who are governed. I believe that the Board of Selectmen must commit to preparing timely, complete, and clear financial information. I commit to you that as a member of the Board of Selectmen, I will support an audit committee which has outside members, people from outside town halls sitting on that committee and reviewing the financial statements and the audit process. That I will support the weighing of every dollar we spend, not just against other departmental dollars or other municipal or education dollars, but against all the needs of the community, and will apply my skills and abilities as somebody who's familiar with financial information, can articulate it to others in a persuasive manner, to make sure that we're spending our dollars in a manner which is consistent with the values that we agree upon. I'm confident that working together we can articulate a common vision for the town and carry out that vision. I ask each of you 2 things. First, that you vote for me on March 28th. And secondly, and more importantly, that you join me in the belief that town government can and will make a difference in the quality of our lives and the lives of our children, friends, and neighbors.
Thank you. I'm the challenger. I'm not the status quo. I'd like to open up the process. I'd like to bring people into the discussion who have not perhaps historically or traditionally been there. My background and experience is in finance and negotiations and complex commercial matters. These are matters with big ticket items, big dollar figures rather, for the town, and they matter immensely as we look forward. Everybody's got to be on board or this boat is going to sink. And my hope is that with people talking to each other, if we can get rid of this climate of fear, this sense of if you're not with us, you're against us. Points of view have value, ladies and gentlemen, regardless of where they come from. And I would encourage those points of view to be heard and ask all of you for your support. This is a terrific place, and we have some very significant issues ahead of us. And if people, as a good friend of mine said, who's got 3 children in the schools, roll up their sleeves and look at everything, I think we can get there, and I'd like your help to try to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, thank to WinCam and to the League of Women Voters, and for all of you who came out on a Sunday afternoon. I'm hoping to bring a sense of urgency to the Board of Selectmen, an ability to listen, to try to form consensus around difficult issues and difficult priorities, and to find a way where we can disagree without being disagreeable, to try to restore a tone of respect at the Selectmen's table for those who come to it and those who sit around it. It sends a message to the voters that we're all on the same team. It is one town, and it's time we started working together as one town. The schools will not get as much as the schools want or deserve, and the library will not get the amount of money that they want or deserve. And we need to recognize that up front. We need to work together. We have a great spirit of volunteerism in the town. I don't regard the town as being run by a clique or that it's a closed shop. I didn't grow up in Winchester. I chose to live in Winchester. And I've been afforded every opportunity to be on the Budget Task Force, to be on the Solid Waste Committee, to be on the town meeting for the last 11 years, Finance Committee for 2 years. I'm looking for an opportunity to continue that volunteerism and to help Winchester go forward together as one town. Thank you very much.
Thank you to all of the organizers for today's event, and specifically WinCam. This will be broadcast to the voters of Winchester so that they can make an informed choice on March 28th. The League of Women Voters has long had a little statement that democracy is not a spectator sport. Well, it's up to the voters in Winchester to go to the polls on March 28th and decide who it is you want to have represent you, both on your Board of Selectmen and Board of Assessors, along with the other uncontested offices. But I especially want to thank the candidates for their participation today. They have stepped forward and said they want to serve the town, and I wish all of them luck, and I thank you all very much for participating. Thank you. The first question for the assessors, and we'll begin with Mr. Powers. Would you like to see Winchester adopt classification? Yes or no, and why?
Okay, my answer is no, although the assessors do not vote on this. They bring it to the selectmen. It's their vote. I think that the shift of money would be too small to make it worthwhile affecting our business climate. I think our chamber's done a good job of reinvigorating the center. We don't have empty storefronts. I think the way we would end up with empty storefronts is if we changed the classification and made the businesses, it would be a very small shift, about $21 per household, that would shift over, and the businesses would end up with $300,000 some in expenses that would be passed on. So I think the system currently works. There are many communities like us that do not have classification. We're called a 1.0 classification. I'd say 60 to 65% of communities like Winchester do not have classification, and I do not support it.
I also agree in the same stance. I believe that the business community is important to Winchester, and that if we went to the separate classification, we would scare away business. The town is already taxed in a basis of all the residential property, that if we brought more residential into these places where businesses are, it would take a tax more. The school system, the fire department, police department, where the businesses are only used on a short part of the day. I think this is better off for the town. Winchester is very valuable, and with the residences living so close to Boston, and we have a great educational system. I think that would change with the classification if we drove the businesses out of town.
The next question will begin with Mr. Hernan. What is the difference between tax abatement and tax deferral, as in Chapter 21A? Could you explain that?
Abatement is for, like, seniors taking the reduction of $800. There's other classifications for minor child, blind, that type of thing. Deferment is for people that want to pass on their taxes, elderly, at a later time and date, that they can reduce their taxes by letting it happen when their property is changed.
Yes, abatements have to be applied for once a year. You only have till February 1st, which is a bugaboo we're trying to get over because people don't understand when they have to apply, and they'll come in at different times during the year. We'll still hear them, but we can't give them any abatement unless they apply legally by February 1st. As far as deferrals are concerned, I support them. There's a lot of seniors in this town that should be getting deferrals that don't. They would defer their tax until maybe after they've passed away, or until they go to a nursing home, and I think that's very effective. The town probably charges about 14%, I think is the number, and that would go into an estate and be paid later. Thank you.
And the next question, and we'll begin with Mr. Powers. Do you see any changes that could or should be made to the assessment process? If so, could you be specific what you think we might be able to do?
Yeah, I think 3 years ago when I ran, I had seen a model in Weston of an assessment review committee appointed by the Board of Selectmen to take a close look at the assessment policies in Winchester. We were in the middle of a reval. We haven't done it, but if elected, I intend to follow through and talk to the town manager and the selectmen. I think someone should overview what we do. We only had 106 applications for abatement out of 7,796 properties, but that does not mean that we're doing everything right. It means that people generally realize that the taxes are what they are, and we don't set taxes. That's something to tell someone. It's just a formula that works based on the tax rate. So our job is to assess your property fairly, and I think we've been doing a good job at that. Thank you.
First off, I think the current Board of Assessors does not let the public know about this February date. It's very important that we push that to let the people know. There's a lot of people I've talked to in town that didn't realize that they have to get in by February 1st to apply for abatement. I think that's very, very important. Next on this position of having another board overseeing another board, we are an elected board. How many more boards do you want to keep applying to this? If there is a problem, they can still come in and go to the town manager or whatever like that and go for this. But to have another board, to oversee another board, I don't think is a very good process.
Since there are no other questions for the assessors, we will have the closing statement, and we will begin with Mr. Powers, up to 1 minute.
Thank you. And again, thank the League for having the forum. We're glad to see 4 candidates running for the Board of Selectmen. I think the important thing for the public is the vote. You get a figure of 15, 20%. I don't think it tells you a lot. I think we've seen a lot of patriotic things going on, a lot of problems since 9/11, and I think the best thing the public can do is go out and exercise their right to vote. I think that we have worked diligently on each of the promises I gave you in 2003. I have 2 fine assessors with me, George Anderson and Dave Arico, and the staff are Dan McGurl, Alice Alford, Gina Capone, and Pat Haverty. I think the public has been well served. I hope I can get your support on Tuesday, March 28th.
First off, I want to thank the League of Women Voters again and WinCam for putting on this show today here. Everybody, the taxes are going up. That's one of the big questions. Am I going to affect the taxes from going up? It's not the Board of Assessors' job. We're just evaluating property. That's a big thing for the people to understand. Next, Winchester is one of the most desirable communities in the Commonwealth of Mass to live in. This is a critical time for the town residents, and they deserve to be informed. I am ready to assist in obtaining fair market value for Winchester's residents and inform the public of different programs available to everyone. I have a proven track record with my leadership skills, management experience, and reliability for the job. My view for Winchester is to learn from the past, make smart decisions today, and secure the future of Winchester. I offer a new point of view. Please vote